Right now in America, the economic environment of the country is somewhat complicated. Beginning in early 2020, COVID-19 spread across the globe and caused a worldwide shutdown, leaving many businesses closed or with reduced hours. Now, a couple years later, most of these businesses have reopened, and with the need for workers to fill vacant roles, and even some new ones. The economy is still relatively strong, even with the after effects of the shutdowns and mandates, and this has created a number of opportunities for those looking to enter the workforce, whether just starting out or coming back from a pause in their career. For those with disabilities, though, these opportunities do not look the same for them as they do for those without disabilities. Even in times of a strong economy, adults with disabilities face lower rates of employment, with nearly 2 of every 3 unemployed. This can have some serious implications. Whereas Americans without a disability face unemployment rates of 8%, those with disabilities are unemployed at a rate of 21%. This can greatly affect general well-being due to its implications for wealth. In 2019, individuals with disabilities faced poverty rates of 25.9%, a little over 1 out of every 4, while non-disabled Americans averaged 11.4%. This can impact access to safe environments and proper nutrition, affecting one's health in many ways. Now, adults with disabilities do have a number of legal protections in place to prevent discrimination based on these disabilities, both physical disabilities and intellectual and developmental disabilities. The Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination based on an individual's disability, whether at work or at school, meaning that an employer cannot deny an individual a role or promotion based on their disability. If they are qualified for the role, they have a right to be considered in the same respect given to an able-bodied candidate. The reality of adults with disabilities in the workforce, however, is not as ideal as the ADA intended to be. While the nature of some of these disabilities may make it difficult to enter the workforce, such as with severe mental or physical impairments, some adults have avoided the workforce due to different obstacles. Some adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities believe that they have fewer opportunities than their non-disabled counterparts due to the needs that their disabilities require. For some, this may include more frequent breaks or greater supervision. Their apprehension also includes general concerns about discrimination that they may face in the workplace. The ADA may offer legal protections against discrimination, but some of these adults may not have the financial ability to pursue legal action against discriminatory actions towards them, or they may otherwise fear backlash from their employer or their peers if they file a complaint, or even a lawsuit, depending on the seriousness of the event. These are barriers that need to be addressed in order to make more adults with disabilities feel comfortable entering the workforce. But what about those that already feel some comfort entering the workforce and desire to do so? For those that wish to enter the workforce, doing so can present some unique obstacles, even outside of blatant discrimination. Some employers will follow the law to the T, ensuring that they follow the Americans with Disabilities Act, but they may still hold some apprehension and hesitate when considering a candidate with a disability. These employers may be open to hiring such employees, but they often have concerns. Why is this? The simplest answer comes down to misunderstanding. Employers may believe that these employees will require a number of needs, better known as accommodations, that able-bodied workers do not require. Or they may otherwise believe the worker won't be able to complete core tasks due to their disability. Though this might not be true, but a general misunderstanding of some disabilities can hinder employers' perception of these workers' abilities. Where does this misunderstanding come from? Much of the misunderstanding that goes into employers' ideas of intellectual and developmental disabilities comes from a lack of knowledge on this topic. Physical disabilities are a bit more well-known, as some of the limitations caused by physical disabilities can be inferred through observation and experience. But for intellectual disabilities, many people have very little understanding or experience with the topic, which can lead to incorrect assumptions about those who have this form of disability. So, what are intellectual and developmental disabilities? Intellectual disabilities are a complex, multifaceted subject, but for this video, we'll cover some of the basics to provide a better foundation for understanding. The website for the Special Olympics defines intellectual disability as the term used to describe a person with certain limitations in cognitive functioning and other skills, including communication and self-care. These disabilities often include lower than average IQ scores, though not always the case, and differences in adaptive behavior, which involve conceptual, social, and practical skills often used in daily life. Conceptual skills include ideas such as language and literacy, as well as money, time, and number concepts. Social skills cover concepts such as interpersonal skills, naivety, and the ability to follow rules and obey laws. Practical skills include things such as personal care, safety, and use of the telephone or money. While these ideas may seem relatively straightforward to some, intellectual disabilities can lead to issues with these skills and related concepts, even with attempts to understand them, and this can be frustrating. These limitations can have a particular impact on the individual's daily life, which can also translate into functioning in the workplace. Now, the term intellectual disability covers a wide range of disabilities that can impair some of these skills that we just discussed. In these disabilities, there can also be a wide range of the impact that the disability can have on an individual's functioning. For some, the disability can be severe, preventing most of these skills from developing beyond a certain point. But for others, these skills may somewhat develop and present only relatively minor limitations. Let's look at some examples. For this, the most common example given is that of autism spectrum disorder, or simply autism. Autism is frequently described as a spectrum, with the disability having different impacts on those with the disorder. The disability originates in the brain and its ability to process different stimuli, from lights and noise to different touch sensations. The brain with autism often has difficulty holding onto and processing these sensory inputs, which can lead to overstimulation. Overstimulation can lead to difficulty focusing, such as with completing tasks, and this can overwhelm the individual. For some people, they misinterpret this reaction in the brain, perceiving this situation as a meltdown common with children, when in reality there is nothing childish about it. Autism has been shown to present with more random activity in the brain's sensory areas, and with less coordinated activity in the brain itself. Because of this, certain stimuli can feel like being at a rock concert for hours on end. It leaves them overwhelmed and drained, and they cannot help that their brain reacts this way. Another disability that has a similar effect in the brain is that of Fragile X syndrome. Fragile X syndrome is a little different than autism in that it involves changes in the FMR1 gene, which controls the production of a specific protein needed for brain development. With this disorder, none of this protein is developed due to disruptions in the gene, and this disrupts the normal function of nerve cells in the brain. Because of this, social and developmental functioning is reduced, impeding some of the skills we discussed before. Some of these impairments are similar to those in autism, and autism is also generally more frequent in those with Fragile X syndrome due to their unique connection. Down syndrome is our last example that we'll touch on briefly. Down syndrome involves chromosome 21, which holds 200 to 300 genes that include instructions for making proteins, with different roles in the body. The disorder results in 3 copies of chromosome 21 instead of 2 copies, and this often results in weak muscle tone in infancy and intellectual disability that can impact the skills discussed. The 3 disabilities we've discussed can greatly impact a person's functioning in day-to-day activities, including functioning in the workplace. Issues in brain development can affect one's abilities with number concepts and the handling of money, and sensitivities, such as those with autism, can create overstimulation and distractions that can impede work. However, these disabilities do not equate to a complete inability to function, within or outside of the workforce. Opportunities are available for adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and these opportunities have the ability to grow as employers and those in positions of authority become more educated on these topics. By understanding these disabilities and their impacts on intellectually disabled workers, employers can provide reasonable accommodations and a more suitable work environment for their employees. These individuals often want to work and offer meaningful contributions to their communities. But as it is, there are certain barriers that hinder and even prevent access to roles, which will persist unless change is made. Some organizations have started to spark this change, such as Planting Possibilities in Northwest Indiana. These organizations are working with adults with intellectual disabilities and local businesses to connect employers with those workers, helping to mend the gap between those with intellectual disabilities and those without. To learn more about Planting Possibilities and its mission, click the link in the description below and follow Taylor Maggs on SoundCloud and listen to the podcast on this organization there.